This is part of the Strays Sea Battles of World War II, the sinking of HMS Hood on May 24, 1941. The sinking of HMS Hood on May 24, 1941, was one of the most cataclysmic events of World War II and remains etched in the annals of naval history. Hood was not just a battleship. She was an icon of British naval power, a ship that symbolized the pride, engineering excellence, and tradition of the Royal Navy. The loss of Hood was not merely a military defeat, but a national tragedy that shook the British Empire to its core. The rise of the Hood. HMS Hood was commissioned in 1920 and quickly became one of the largest and most powerful ships in the world. She was a battlecruiser, designed to outgun any opponent while maintaining the speed needed to outrun potential threats. Her size and formidable armament made her a force to be reckoned with, and she was widely regarded as the pride of the Royal Navy. For years, Hood sailed the seas, taking part in numerous exercises and proving her superiority in various naval maneuvers. Yet, her design, while revolutionary at the time, would eventually be her downfall. Her vulnerabilities were not immediately apparent. In particular, Hood was built with a relatively light armor scheme. The intention had been to maximize speed while still being able to engage most enemy ships. However, by the time World War II broke out, the limitations of this design were becoming more apparent, particularly against ships that could deliver devastating firepower, like the German Bismarck. The Bismarck, a new threat. In the early years of the war, the Royal Navy was faced with a new and terrifying threat, the German battleship Bismarck. The Bismarck was one of the largest battleships ever built, with state-of-the-art armor and firepower that was unmatched. She was heavily armed with 15-inch guns capable of devastating enemy ships, and her thick armor made her nearly impervious to conventional naval gunfire. The Germans had designed the Bismarck to be the ultimate battleship, a war machine intended to dominate the Atlantic and sink Allied merchant vessels with impunity. The British knew that they had to neutralize the Bismarck to prevent her from devastating their vital supply lines. By May 1941, the Bismarck had already sunk the British battlecruiser HMS Repulse and was threatening to continue her rampage. The Royal Navy scrambled to confront this new menace. The encounter. On the morning of May 24, 1941, Hood and her sister ship, Prince of Wales, were tasked with confronting the Bismarck in the Denmark Strait, a narrow waterway between Greenland and Iceland. The Royal Navy hoped that their combined firepower and speed would be enough to defeat the Bismarck. As the two British ships steamed toward the Bismarck, the fate of the battle seemed uncertain. The weather was poor, with heavy fog and choppy seas, which would make targeting difficult for both sides. At 5:52 a.m., the two fleets finally encountered each other. The Bismarck and the Prinz Eugen opened fire first, followed by Hood and Prince of Wales. The battle began in earnest. The fatal blow. Despite the immense firepower of both the Hood and the Bismarck, the British battlecruiser would not last long. The Bismarck landed its first decisive hit at 5:55 a.m., striking Hood with a shell that penetrated her aft magazine. The explosion was catastrophic. The detonation ignited Hood's ammunition stores and caused a massive fire, which spread throughout the ship in seconds. The sheer force of the explosion tore Hood apart. The ship's stern disintegrated, and within minutes, the entire vessel was engulfed in flames. The Hood sank so rapidly that there was no time for most of the crew to abandon ship. The blast was heard miles away and caused a towering plume of smoke and fire that could be seen by the surrounding ships. The destruction of Hood was so complete that only 3 men, able seaman Ted Briggs, Robert Tilburn, and William John Dundas, survived. They had been thrown clear of the ship by the explosion and managed to stay afloat in the freezing waters of the Atlantic. For the other 1,415 crew members, there was no chance of survival. The loss of Hood sent shockwaves through Britain and the world. This was the largest British warship to be sunk in action, and the public was stunned by the scale of the disaster. The crew of Prince of Wales was devastated by the loss of their sister ship and was left to continue the fight against the Bismarck, but with heavy hearts. Aftermath. The British resolve. Despite the shock of the loss, the British Navy vowed to avenge the destruction of Hood. The sinking had ignited an unrelenting pursuit of the Bismarck. British ships and aircraft launched a concerted effort to track down the German battleship. For days, Bismarck tried to escape, but the Royal Navy was relentless. Finally, on May 27th, the British Navy located the Bismarck and launched a final attack. In a furious battle, Bismarck was severely damaged and sank, but not before inflicting heavy damage on the British fleet. The Bismarck's sinking marked the end of the German Navy's ability to challenge British supremacy in the Atlantic. However, the victory came at a cost. Hood was gone, and her loss remained a somber reminder of the dangers of naval warfare. The legacy of the Hood. The sinking of HMS Hood is still remembered today as a tragic moment in naval history. Her loss was a painful reminder of the human cost of war, and it spurred the British to continue the fight against the Axis powers with even greater determination. In the years that followed, many memorials were created to honor the men who served on Hood. In 1989, a British expedition located the wreck of Hood on the floor of the Atlantic, nearly 10,000 feet beneath the waves. It was a haunting reminder of the battle and the men who gave their lives in the service of their country. Hood's legacy endures, not only as a symbol of British naval power, but also as a somber reminder of the fragility of even the mightiest warships. The battle that led to her sinking also demonstrated the fierce determination and courage of those who fought in the battle, both on the British and German sides. The loss of HMS Hood remains one of the most iconic and emotional chapters of World War II.